This presentation is based on a talk paper that I gave at a Juris Diversitas conference on comparative law at University of Jean Moulin in Lyon, France in 2017. It was later published in this collection of papers by Routledge in 2021. The title of this paper was "The Global Rule of Law, the Decline of Indigenous Cultures, and the Pandemic of Human Obesity." I will read just a bit of the introduction or abstract from that paper. There are many ways to understand the worldwide crisis of human obesity, a crisis that is following on the advancing project of globalization. One way to understand it is from the perspective of the legal regime that is shaping the global project and that provides a foundation for the human conditions that are coming to exist worldwide. There are obvious reasons to assume that a standardized program for imposing order on persons and things across every region of the earth might also have a significant impact on sources of nutrition, habits of consumption, and general standards of health. In fact, it seems impossible that the legal basis of global governance being constructed would not have such an impact. Viewed in this way, the spread of obesity might be understood as an effect of the displacement of more traditional modes of existence by a transcendent and authoritatively regulated way of life. The problem could be explained as resulting from the displacement of organic local culture and its replacement by the impersonal instruments of legal rule that will authoritatively determine patterns of production, distribution, and consumption of food products. The increase in obesity might also have to do with an availability of food resources that has shifted from locally produced to industrialized and mass-marketed replacements. It might be viewed as an educative problem for populations newly immersed in an atmosphere of electronically transmitted sound and image with its artificially created needs and appetites. In addition to these might be the generalized impact of corporatizing labor, atomizing of families, and the legal individuation of persons. The project of globalization involves both historic traditions of Western law, civilian and Anglophone. Although both have long had influence around the world, it is with the growing predominance of an anglicized global law that the incidence of obesity is reaching crisis proportions. This fact is significant because the countries where the two different laws prevail have long had different dispositions toward traditional cultures generally and food cultures specifically. However, when examining the incidence of human obesity in the project of globalization, an additional factor must be considered. It is that the particular version of Anglophone legal method being employed globally carries with it a tendency to American values and material aspirations. Thus, it not only has the fundamental Anglophone elements, but also certain specific ways of shaping an atmosphere of human existence that resists deep enculturation. It assumes legal authority to be unquestioned and the complex reasonings of law to be properly inaccessible to public understanding. It regards the legal person as unanchored by embodied knowledge, the restraints of manner and custom, leaving each person to default patterns of thought and behavior within the limits of an ordered freedom. It shapes a personality adapted to continuously changing external stimuli within an atmosphere of corporatized competition. To the extent these traits have come to reflect the American way of life, they are deeply connected to the legal premise that underlies it. It should be no surprise that, as an Americanized legal regime is extended across the earth, certain trends of health and nutrition, including certain pathologies, in particular the phenomenon of morbid obesity, would follow. Probably in no country of the world is the form of governance, the way of life, the values and aspirations of its people more avowedly identified with its legal foundation than is America. Yet curiously, this harbinger and hegemon of globalization, which represents the dream of freedom and opportunity to multiple millions around the world, also has the distinction of being the original source of a major crisis of health that is sweeping every continent. Americans are known to have a troubled relationship with food and the body for reasons that are undoubtedly complex, but it is inconceivable that these stigmata of American life cannot be influenced by the rule of law upon which its foundation rests. The only real questions concern in what way and to what extent this is true. There are scientific ways to measure and analyze the impact that an American version of Anglophone law might have on patterns of living, on habits of food consumption and nutrition in the global age. However, what follows will be an attempt to explain the global pandemic of human obesity as a question of principle rather than evidence. The approach taken will not be a conventional scientific one based on empirical proof or statistical data. Instead, it will attempt to define relevant characteristics that are basic to the nature of the two Western traditions of law. That is, characteristics which, if removed, neither of the two traditions would be either characteristic, civilian, or Anglophone. Based on these descriptions, it may be shown that by its very nature, Anglophone law in general, and its American version specifically, is fatal, is fatal to the indigenous and will have a deleterious effect on the global level of culture generally, an effect that reveals itself in an array of pathological symptoms, including a global crisis of human obesity.